Okay, so here I am in my very, very simple white box level here. So what I want to go through in this video is how do we set up our input system. And through the process of doing this, you're going to see a lot of things that you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Don't worry, we're going to cover all of this, and you'll get a lot of hands-on experience. But in general, based on the assignment, we're going to make a one-button game. Well, really, we're making a full game, but in this particular case, I want to use this example of the one-button game to show you how to set up your input system. And so what we want to do is, I think we should actually start, instead of doing the input system, let's start with kind of something to give input to, I guess. So if you right-click in the content folder, do a new folder. Let's call this Blueprints. So if you recall the Blueprints intro, this is a visual scripting language that Unreal Engine uses, and it's fantastic for prototyping. And in many cases, it can be combined with native C++ code to make shippable, production-ready games. And it's getting better and better, and it's just very, very fast, and I think you guys will really like it. So anyway, so in Blueprints, let's create a new blueprint. And so if we right-click here and you choose Basic Asset, we want a blueprint class. And then pick a parent class. Think of classes, for those of you with no or little programming background. You can think of a class like a factory, like it's something it can just has a set of kind of given features and functions that it has. And so like you can say, make me a car, and we all know the car has a steering wheel and it has 4 wheels, and you can drive it around. So what kind of class do we want? Actor. Pawn is an actor that can be possessed and receive input from a controller. That already sounds fine for us. So go ahead and choose pawn. And then in terms of naming convention, I generally will, for blueprints, I will just do BP underscore and then give it some kind of name like input pawn. Okay. Fantastic. And it even looks like a pawn. Okay, so we don't need to open this up, do we? We do not. We can actually just drag this into our world. And gosh, it's just a little sphere. Actually, it's nothing. That just happens to represent the kind of the base or the root of it here. But now that we have it in our world, what I would like us to do is we need to make sure that we're going to set up our input. We're going to set up an action. It's connected to our space bar that outputs something on the console. So that's what we're going to do in this video. But we need to do a couple things to tell the engine that we want to allow this pawn to receive input from the player. And so if you select the pawn here in the world outliner, and then you see underneath pawn here in the details, you can see auto possess player, and it's disabled. So we want to change this to be player 0, because that's going to be obviously it's just us. We're all alone. So if we had many, many people, this wouldn't be how you would do this, but we're testing stuff. So, okay, that should be all we need to do to set up at least the basics of passing input. So now to the meaty part here. So if you go to the Edit menu, Project Settings, and then scroll here to underneath Engine to Input. So these are the input settings that we have here. And what we're interested in is the first part here, bindings. So what are bindings? They're action and access mappings that provide a mechanism to conveniently map keys and access to input behaviors, yada, yada, yada. So what these really do is think of this particular situation. Okay, so you've made this game, and you want to be able to support many input mechanisms, right? Or maybe you want to allow the player to map their own inputs, so they may not like spacebar as the jump key. They might want to have their left mouse button or something. To do that in code or to do it in blueprints would be absolutely a hot mess. So you don't want that. What you actually want to do is you use the engine's input manager to control that stuff for you. And similarly with axis mappings, and that's just a way of saying, well, I could do an input or an action that was, I'm turning left, and to turn left, I press the Q key, and to turn right, I press the E key. That's just a 0 or 1. It's a very binary thing on a keyboard. So axis mappings actually allow you to get what's called a float value back from an axis. Meaning if you have a game controller and you've got that, like, you press left on the gamepad just a little bit, it won't be a value of 1. It'll be a value of maybe 0.2 or something between 0 and 1. And you press right, it may come with the value of like negative 0.2. So these axis mappings and action mappings together kind of give you enough to set up a pretty complex input system. But for us, we just need one action. We're not going to cover axis mappings in this video. We'll cover it later when we start setting up our movement. But for action mappings, we need to make one. So add to action mappings, press the plus key, and then expand this, and then we want to give it a name. In our case, we're going to make it jump because our character is going to jump. You might have one that's something else, fire or crouch or charge. So once you've given it a name, if you expand that again, you'll see that you can select a key value. Right now it's none. It's really not a key value. It's all sorts of values. So if you expand that, you can see in the hierarchies here that it covers quite a lot of different types of input. In fact, I think Android. Oh my gosh, yeah. So you could map a key to the volume up button. If you really wanted to, you could make a whole game that was, maybe your one button is the volume button. But in our case, we are not creative at all. And so if I want to search, we have a space bar because that's what everybody thinks is the jump button mostly. So if you choose space bar, and that's it. If you wanted to add more, you can just click plus to your heart's content. I've actually never tried how many you can actually choose. And then you can choose a few others. For example, a gamepad. If you wanted to also have a jump mapped on the gamepad, you may go gamepad, and then I think in general, like face button, left shoulder is a special button. I think it normally calls it special right, special left. So all of these map to different gamepads. So if you want to figure out what's the right one for me to choose based on the gamepad you're targeting or the particular system, just Google UE4 key binding Xbox One or something, and it will give you a graphic that tells you, oh, this is the A button is special left or something. So let's put X to delete those twice. Okay. All right. So that's all you have to do. But do it. So once you've set up your input, we can close this. And now that's going to flow through, like all that power is going to flow directly through to pretty much anything you make here that you want to use blueprints with. So if we've already placed our pawn. In fact, I'm going to open this up now. And so don't freak out too much. We'll cover a lot of this stuff here. But on the left-hand side, another handy thing I like to do is just like click this tab and drag it and kind of dock it over here so that I'm able to quickly go between my scene and whatever I'm working on here in a blueprint. Okay, so what I want to do very, very quickly is this is kind of, I just want to see something, right? You don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it. So if you want to choose add component, which you do, and that's going to add a component to this actor, which is a pawn, right? So many times I'm going to use words like actor, but what I mean, you may be like, why did you say actor? It's because everything is inheriting from that actor class, right? They all have these parent classes. In this case, if I'm in the upper right here, the parent class is a pawn. But I'll use the word actor, and then I'll use the word component for things inside the actor, like things that are attached to it, like a cube or a camera or whatever, audio or a light. So in our case, we're just going to choose a sphere. And so once I do that, let's see, we've got this huge sphere covering our view here. So if we go back to Sandbox, you'll see that now we've got a sphere there. I'll just kind of drag it up there. This really won't matter too much for this video, but I like it. Okay, so So back to the blueprint editor here, and we want to go to the event graph tab. And so this isn't a video just introducing blueprints. That would take a long time, at least for me. This is a video on getting some input. So what I'm going to do is delete all of these kind of grayed out nodes. These just happen to be nodes that are like very high octane, are used quite a bit. Things like begin play would be, if that actor's in the world, then when you press the play button, it will do something, right? An event tick is just every single frame that the engine calls do something, which is actually quite fast. So putting things in here, I kind of try to avoid it unless I really want to, because it can impact performance, but it's not too bad on a modern computer. So I'm going to select everything and delete it. All right. So how about, what are we doing? So basically we want to say, if I press the spacebar, I want some notification that I press the spacebar on the screen when I press play. And if I release the spacebar, I want some notification. Sure, we'll save. I want some notification that I released that particular input. So if you right click here, you can see the actions we have available. I named mine jump. So if you type jump, you'll see here it is. This little icon means it's an event. And that's pretty cool. So now it knows that it's an action, and it knows it has a released and pressed. So what this means is when it detects, the input manager detects that any of the bindings associated with this action have been pressed, we can do something. And so what do we want to do? We want to print a message. So if I click from here and I drag out and I let go, you see that we have a bunch of actions we can do. The action that I want is called print string. String. Right here, and it's a function based on the F it has. Print string hello. I don't want to say hello. I want to say jump pressed, and we'll put an exclamation mark for fun. Now I could do the same thing here, but I'm actually just going to select this. Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and then for released, I'm going to say jump released. Nice. And one other thing we can do while we're at it, just because it's good practice, if we select all of this and we press the C key, you can comment it. So let's name this our jump action so that we know. And I'm scrolling in and out left here. Okay, compile this. So what I'm doing is generally called like debugging. So I want to know if a particular, like what's the engine telling me? Like, is this action even working when I press spacebar? And if it is working, then I should see printed out jump pressed. And then when I let go of spacebar, I should see jump released. That's what I should see. So now keep in mind we're possessing the player here. Always kind of remember to do that, especially if you're like, why isn't this working? Generally it's because you're not possessing the player and getting input from them. So if I press play, now I'm possessing this pawn. So this is, I guess, the view that it has. And I'll click my mouse button to go into the viewport in the game here. And I press spacebar, jump press, jump released, jump press, jump released. Very cool. So if I hold the spacebar, you'll see in the upper right, it's just going to tick quite a bit. And then I let it go, you see jump released. Great. Okay, so that's pretty neat. And that's kind of, I know it's extremely basic. But now that we have this jump action set up, there's a lot more that we could do. For example, we might want to, and we can even simulate things. So in our case, maybe we want to know how long the jump button has been pressed, right? So that we can, maybe in our case, it's if you hold the jump button down, you're charging up some special move or something. So we'll need to grab that value, and we want to, store it somewhere and use it later. So how can we kind of use this, the stuff that we know so far, which is not a lot, it's how to print a string to the console. But we're grabbing this, right? So we definitely know that pressed is happening. So what we could do in this particular case is sometimes you can even start with a comment. So if I press C, I can say, let's see, we want to, that's fine, grab and store how long the jump key has been pressed. Okay, I'm kind of doing this on the fly, so we'll see if it, wish me luck, which is why I'm going to do weird stuff like choose my comment colors and stuff, just because if we go to the details here, okay, nice. Awesome. Okay. Grab and store how long the jump key has been pressed. So this is going to be a number of seconds. So in that case, let's create a variable. So we're jumping around a little bit, but I think it's fine. And it's going to be totally useful because it gives you some tools to make your own stuff. So on the left-hand side here, you have variables, and you've got this plus button here. And so we want to make a variable, and that variable is going to be local to this actor, local to this pawn. So if we click plus, see new var underscore 0. Let's name it jump start. And if you look all the way over here in the details panel, you'll see the variable type. And there's lots of different variable types, so many different variable types in Unreal Engine. I mean, there's some primitive ones, which are at the top here, like Boolean, byte, integer, float. Boolean is just, well, mouse over them, true or false. Byte is an 8-bit number. So what's used quite a bit, at least for us, it's going to be stuff like Boolean to check if something's true or false, integers, which are whole numbers, float, which is a floating point number, which is decimals, right? And then vector is super useful because we're dealing in 3D space, X, Y, Z values and whatnot. Transform is just a bunch of, well, 3 vectors, right? One for the location, one for the rotation, and one for the scale. But to keep it kind of simple, we choose a floating point number instead of a Boolean. And then I like to compile once I've done that. And then you can see already, we even on the right-hand side have this jump value of 0. We don't need to set a default value. Okay, jump start. Can you guess the next one I'm going to make? Yeah, jump end. So if we make one jump end, jump start, jump end. Okay. And so we want to actually see how long this is being pressed. So if we were to just do something like, let's just, for fun, this is how you can set a variable, setting a variable or get a variable. If you just select it here and drag and drop it, you'll see you can get that variable, which will get whatever the variable is and allow you to do something to it, or you can set it. In this case, if you drag it and say set, we see jump start has a value of 0. And then this is how kind of blueprints flow. They flow from, in our case, left to right along this white pathway. It's an input node and an output node here. And so what this would do is if we pressed this space bar or the jump action, it would print a message and it would set jump start to 0. Or if we said 10, it would set this value jump start to 10. It's totally not useful. What we need to do is we need another node because we have no concept of time here. We could set different values, but it would be basically like if we did the same thing here and jump end. Oops, not get. We want to set. If we did that, it's not really doing anything useful at all, right? It's just like these magic numbers, which we want to try to avoid. So we need a different place to set this value. And I deleted it, and it's okay because we can put it back. But we basically want this concept of time. And time happens to be handled through, in our case, this event tick. And if I right-clicked here and I typed the word tick, sorry, and you notice there's a star because it's very important. And there's a few that are going to have stars next to them. And in general, if you see them, you know they're going to be useful to you at some point in time. And so what event tick does, and let's have some fun with what we know. So let's figure out what it does. Let's print a string. And, oh goodness, I don't know what this is going to do. And you see how I just took this output here, which is this float value called delta seconds, and I just dragged it directly in, and the engine itself is going to convert this float value to a string value because this takes a string in. So if I compile that, and oh, by the way, save. So I use this save all because, if you do save current, it's actually not working. Save all will save all the things. So press that often because sometimes things like this can maybe cause the editor to crash. I don't know. Let's press play. Okay. Right, and this is the delta seconds between ticks. So it's fast. It's 0.008334. Yeah, you see my jump buttons are flying by there. Okay. Anyway, so that's what tick is doing. It's giving us essentially every single tick, every single frame of the engine. It's going to print out. It's going to print out hello. Hello. Okay. Excellent. So this is where we want to do a thing, right? So what we want to do in tick is we want to, when we press the jump button, we actually want to say that they're jumping. And then when we release, we want to say that they're not jumping or that it was released. So these print strings are useful to humans like us because we know that their input is working, but they don't do anything for the engine. So we need another variable. Actually, I had no idea there were so many already, but let's create another variable. So this variable should be quite simple, and we just want is jumping. And I like to do is in camel case here. I should have done jump start, jump end in that as well. Anyway, is jumping. Let's choose a float. That was kind of weird. Not choose a float. We want this to be a true or false value. So is jumping is true or false. And then drag out here. And then we want to set. So basically we're going to set, I'm going to do a copy paste. When they've pressed it, we want to set is jumping to true. So I'm just going to select this little checkbox and that sets is jumping true. And then when they've released, is jumping false, right? Or we could say is ready to jump. That makes a lot of sense there. Okay. And now we need, actually we don't need these two things here. We can do, well, we could. Now what do we want to do? Okay. Grab and store how long the jump key has been pressed. Okay, we can do it this way. There's actually a couple, obviously many different ways you can do this, and probably some better than others, but for us, let's introduce another node here. I said this wasn't going to be a blueprint tutorial, but actually I feel like this will be helpful. So let's do a branch, and this is part of flow control, and you notice you have the little star there too. And so this branch will do one thing if whatever condition you pass it is true, and another thing if whatever condition you pass it is false. So we have this condition is jumping. So if I click on this and I drag it out, I want to get that this time. And you notice it has these two little red things. So you kind of can feel what I'm going to do there. Just drag and drop it. And so on tick, it's going to say is jumping. If it's true, well, let's make sure what we're doing is working. I want to print a string, and now I want to say is jumping. And then jump pressed is jumping. Maybe do I am jumping so we can see that. Okay. And then watch what happens when we release this. it's going to set is jumping to false. So then this will be false and then nothing will come out of it. So we don't spam our screen. So go back here and press play. And we have a nice empty console. If we press spacebar, look what just happened. I am jumping and then jump released. So it's hard to see this. If you press the tilde key twice, it will bring up your console and you can use the scroll bar and see what happened. So you get jump pressed and then a bunch of I am jumpings and then jump released is at the end. So that's already kind of cool because we have, you know, we kind of have a way to at least through the time, as far as the engine knows, through ticks, we have a way to say, hey, we've got this thing happening here. So now we could use our jump start, jump end, right, if we really wanted to do some extra math. And let's do that because I said we weren't going to use it, but I made you guys make these, so I don't want to ruin them and waste your time. So I am jumping should obviously set some value for jump start. And then let's see. Can we do that? We set jump start to that. Right click. Do we have any concept of time? I just typed time. Time span. Get, well, there's a bunch of stuff. Get seconds. Get milliseconds. No. Sorry. We don't want that. It's way too complex. Right. So we can just set the jump start to 0. And then if we do jump end false, let's see. Jump end, and we need a way to kind of set our timer. Let's think about this here. I am jumping. Set a counter. That could happen. We just keep, we could basically keep every time adding to jump start. Yeah, okay. Sorry, we're going to delete these. Left click, delete. This happens. I just want a counter. So I'm going to choose a new variable. And I'm going to do, again, we'll do a float, and I'll just say jump counter. Jump counter. And then drag that out. And we want to set it. And what we want to set it with is, like, we could have done like a, instead of having it be a float, let's make it an integer. Okay, this will be better for a counter. Having a float counter is kind of strange because then we're like, what do we set at 0.1 every single frame, or do we set it just 1? So having it be an integer means we need whole numbers. So now we can set this. You notice a little different color. And then when we release this, okay. So up here in our, when we release the jump button, we want to set the counter back to 0. Let's do that up here because it makes it just easier to read. And then in our event tick, what we're going to do is while it's pressed, which is this whole stream here, we're going to be incrementing this counter. And so one way to increment it is if we get the jump counter here, then what can we do? Well, right now it's setting jump counter to 0. So we need a little bit of math. So if we grab that jump counter value, we actually want to set it to the previous value plus 1. And so drag out here and just press plus, and you see you can have this like increment and or integer plus integer. Integer plus integer. Great. And it already has a 1 there for us because it's so common to use it. And so it will do this. It will add 1, and then we want to add 1 to our counter here. And we know that I am jumping is working, so I'm going to delete that and then kind of clean up my blueprints a little bit like that. this is just depending on how you want to live your life. You can have it look kind of like this. I've seen other people who have blueprints that are just, it doesn't matter if you have it like, I mean, it does. It's going to drive me crazy. But anyway, okay. And then let's just be good and print a string. And we know this, we don't just want to print the word hello. We actually want to output the value of the new variable. So or the new value of the jump counter variable. And so again, I just dragged into this string and it's going to convert that for me. So now, what should happen when we press the spacebar? Well, let's see. And then I'll do a quick run through of this, and then we can chop off the video there. And I'll try in future ones to not be so rambly, but I feel like this is hopefully useful to you. Okay, so let's press play. Moment of truth. Da, 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 da. Okay, pressing spacebar. Whoa, cool. Look at that. Jump released. And then again, jump released. So you see what's happening here is it's allowing us to, basically what we've done, at least I'm gonna press escape. Well, kind of what we've done in this video is we set up this very simple action. We started off just making sure we were able to get that to print to the screen. We had an idea, basically on the fly, that we wanted to be able to do some type of mechanism whereby we were going to charge up a power or whatever. And instead of just try to implement that, we just take a kind of approach through, okay, well, what types of debugging or what types of information do we want to show ourselves as programmers or as designers to make sure we're getting the right kind of data that we need. And now really what we have is kind of cool. We have this counter that's being updated every tick that can drive all sorts of behaviors, right? So we've learned about, how to branch based on a variable. So we learned how to create some simple variables. We learned how to increment those. We learned how to set them through inputs. We learned how to do something within the game loop, which is pretty cool. And we also learned a little bit of flow control, right? So that branch. And if you wanted, you could keep passing branches, right? I mean, I know I said I was going to stop. So if you're like, okay, Christian, you can stop now. You can just stop the video. But I feel like I'm on a roll. So let's say I wanted to do another branch and I wanted a new condition, but I don't want to create variables for every single thing. I mean, you should. It's not a bad habit to get into. But, I'm just interested in the jump counter. If the jump counter is, let's say, let's see here. I really shouldn't branch that off of this. I should branch it off of, again, remember what I said about your event tick. It's kind of sacred, at least to me. I try to only put things that need that function, even though it probably doesn't matter if you're working on a PC or something, but if you're making a mobile game, it might really matter. Let's say I do it here. So when I press the jump key, or let's say when I release the jump key, instead of set jump counter to 0, well, I'm going to do that. I want to set a branch. So now we've decided that, if our counter is above 100, let's say, we're going to print a message saying like super jump. And if it's below 100, well, we don't want to print the message. We want the character to super jump or something. But for our purposes, we're gonna grab some input, do some stuff on it, and then give us some programmer output. So we want to print a string, this branch again, that says super jump. Great. And then once we've super jumped, we want to no more super jumping until we have charged up our button again. And then I'm lazy, so I'm gonna copy paste these same things here, and then be like noob jump. All right. And now what's our condition? We've got nothing there. like I was saying, making variables. You could do something like can super jump and then all sorts of stuff like that. But I'm actually just going to grab my jump counter, get it, sorry. And I'm going to check if I kind of drag off another line here. I can just do, I want it to be greater than or equal to 100. And so, and then plug that in. It says, notice how it says 0. So in this case, one other quick thing I'll show you is I could just type in 100 here and then leave it at that. But since it's such a, for us, I mean, as you're playtesting things, you're going to replace these print strings like super jump and noob jump with probably with a lot of activities or maybe, another function that's causing the player to jump. This 100 is kind of, it's a magic number. It's bad because you want to really avoid numbers like, or any variable declarations in here that are things that are super important for your game. Generally anything that's not like a 1 or a 0. So in that case, we do want to make this into a variable. So if you right click, this is a quick little shortcut. If you right click on something like integer and I right click and I say promote to variable, it will make it into a new variable and then say, what do you want to name it? We'll say jump threshold. How do you spell threshold? Threshold? No, it's just 1. Sorry, I should know those things. Okay. Jump threshold, I'm going to compile. And because I had 100 there before I did it, you notice it even gave me a default value over here on the right. And then the last thing I'm going to do, this won't matter for this video, but it's going to matter later on, is I'm going to just over here on the right here where it says, variable is not public and will not be editable on an instance of this blueprint. Click that and you get a little eyeball. Eyeball means that this particular variable, if we compile, I'll show you. I'm going to zoom out here. You see on the right in our details, we have jump threshold and it's set to 100. And what does that mean? Well, we've done too much. We must test. And so if I press spacebar for less than 100, this value is this is going to evaluate to false. I'm going to do a noob jump, and then if I hold it for longer, I'm going to do a super jump. So again, test. So if I press spacebar for a while, it's over 100, super jump. And then if I press space for a little bit, let it go, noob jump, right? Very cool. But if we go ahead and we select our pawn here, let's change our jump threshold to 500. What do you think is going to happen? Well, let's play. So I'm holding it, let it go, noob jump. If I hold it, 500 was a lot. And I let it go, super jump. Right. So what essentially what I did is I created another variable here, and I'm evaluating it, but I'm actually setting, because it's public, I'm able to set that value on an instance of this pawn. And so instance means if I had multiple of these could be enemies or something, I could have different values on each one, right? Notice how that one is a jump threshold of 100. I could give this one 200. And this one 500. So in a multiplayer game, maybe these are all players. And in our case, one has eaten quite a few tacos, so he's, very big. His jump threshold is very high. So he can't super jump unless he really holds down the key for a long time. So I think you can see lots and lots of different opportunities here, even with some of the basic stuff that we learned here. I mean, just to wrap up, always be printing strings and always be passing in good data, good values. Don't get in the habit of just saying, oh, I'm going to print a string. Okay, cool. Let's leave it at what? What's it say? Hello. So I've seen quite a few projects where people just kind of like, yeah, I'm just printing a string. Make sure I see hello. And there's like 10 hellos showing. Don't do that. Name it something valuable. And if so, be sure you're passing in valuable data, especially when you need to test stuff and debug and kind of see how things are working. Very cool. So I hope this is helpful. I'm sorry it's long. but I think everything I've said, minus making some bad variables, should be useful for your homework.